Hey guys, it's Nicole. I am back with another book review slash thoughts because it's like I kind of review it, but it's also just like what I think, like what the book makes me think. Um, like I said in one of my other videos, that the videos I'm going to be making about books currently have been my favorite books that I've read this year. And like I said, I've read a lot of books this year. And this one in particular is actually a book that was trending on TikTok, and I did not pick it up. I had no idea it was trending on TikTok until after I already got it and was already reading it. Um, but I can see why it was trending because it is so good. I picked it up simply because I love the title. That's kind of how I pick my books. Like when I go to a bookstore or anywhere that has books, when I'm looking for books, I'm just looking at the titles and like what the cover looks like. And usually, like, that's when I'll pick it up, like, read the synopsis and then decide if that's what I'm gonna get. So I loved the title of this book, and that's why I picked it out. So the book that I'm gonna be talking about today is The Things We Leave Unfinished. This is by Rebecca Yarros. I think that this is one of my new favorite books. And yeah, I got it at Target. You can see the sticker, the 20% off sticker. I think this is one of my new favorite books for sure. And that's when I saw that it was on TikTok, because it says as seen on TikTok. So I had no idea. But I picked it up because I love the title, The Things We Leave Unfinished. I love that. It's like mysterious. It's definitely intriguing. You're like, okay, what did this person not do? Like, what did they just decide that it was not something that they were able to do in their life? Because that's what it sounds like. You know, the things we leave unfinished, you're just like, okay, why did you leave it unfinished? So that's why I picked it up. So I'm gonna read the synopsis, and then I'll kind of talk about the first, like, general stuff about the book, and then again I will clearly mark the part of the video where spoilers will begin. But the first part of this video is just general, what the book is about, and there's not going to be any spoilers, okay? So the synopsis of this book: 28-year-old Georgia Stanton has to start over after she gave up almost everything in a brutal divorce: the New York house, the friends, and her pride. Now back home at her late great-grandmother's estate in Colorado, she finds herself face to face with Noah Harrison, the best-selling author of 1,000,000 books where the cover is always people nearly kissing. He's just as arrogant in person as in interviews, and she'll be damned if the good-looking writer of love stories thinks he's the one to finish her grandmother's final novel, even if the publisher swears he's the perfect fit. Noah is at the pinnacle of his career. With book and movie deals galore, there isn't much the golden boy of modern fiction hasn't accomplished. But he can't walk away from what might be the best book of the century, the one his idol, Scarlett Stanton, left unfinished. Coming up with a fitting ending for the legendary author is one thing, but dealing with her beautiful, stubborn, cynical great-granddaughter, Georgia, is quite another. But as they read Scarlett's words in both the manuscript and her box of letters, they start to realize why Scarlett never finished the book. It's based on her real-life romance with a World War II pilot, and the ending isn't a happy one. Georgia knows all too well that love never works out, and while the chemistry and connection between her and Noah is undeniable, she's as determined as ever to learn from her great-grandmother's mistakes, even if it means destroying Noah's career. So yes, it definitely comes off as your typical romance book. I mean, not necessarily romance book, because that's a whole other genre, but it's the, like the Hallmark movies. It's like your typical Hallmark movie synopsis, like where it's like, oh, this person leaves their glamorous life and goes to the small town and falls in love with the lumberjack or something like that. It's kind of like that is what I mean by typical romance. But the reason I picked up this book is not just because who doesn't love romance? It's good stuff. Like, I read all kinds of books. The reason I picked up this book and the reason I decided to read it was not just because of the romance aspect, but because of the mystery behind why Georgia's great-grandmother Scarlett didn't finish her final book. And I think I also wanted to read it because I love reading about connections between people. You know, obviously it was obvious this was going to end in a romance, but that's not always why I pick up a book for a connection. It's just connection that I like to read about. I like reading about two people that just like connect on another level that they haven't connected with anyone else before. So those are the reasons why I picked up this book, and I'm so happy I did because it's one of my new favorite books. If any of you who are watching this have ever seen the movie or read the book, The Longest Ride, I think it's a Nicholas Sparks book. I never read the book, but I did see the movie because I love Britt Robertson, the one who stars in it. Love her. If you've ever seen the movie or read the book, it's kind of a similar vibe where we go back and forth in this book from present day to past, where we're talking about the connection and actually budding romance between the two in the present, and they're both invested in the past of this other couple, that it's the story of their romance too. So you have two romance stories going on simultaneously. Although if you've seen The Longest Ride or read the book, you know how it ends. It ends differently than this book ends, for sure, at least with the romance between the couple from the past. So that's kind of the general vibe, and I love that story too, because I love this one. I love people's histories and pasts and stories, and so anything like that is totally up my alley. So I love that movie. I am going to read the book, I just haven't. But that's kind of the vibe you get with this book too. It's very much you're talking about two different romances at once, and they're both connected. Like, it's not random. And they even, the couple in the present kind of even grows a deeper connection because of their investment from the relationship in the past. So I think it's very interesting. I think I personally get so invested in that kind of stuff. So I definitely recommend it if you're into, you know, books where you're just reading about people's like connections with other people, and even romance. Like I said, I do love a good romance. I do love a good story like that, but that is not the main reason I picked up this book. So you kind of get a little bit of all of it with this book. I love the way it's written. I'm going to read the first page of the first chapter, just the first page, just so you guys can get if you haven't read it, because maybe you've like already read the book and you're like, oh, let's see what she says about it. But in case you have not and you're deciding whether you want to read this book, I'm going to read the first page just so you can get a vibe of what it sounds like. So the first page starts with, it says chapter 1 at the top, and then underneath it, it says Georgia. So we're in the present from Georgia's perspective. And I like that she sets it up that way, because some authors kind of choose not to like make it very clear as to what they're talking about, who is talking and everything. And I like that she makes it clear, personally. So we're looking at this book now through Georgia's perspective. That's where we start. However, each chapter that starts with Georgia's perspective begins with a letter that Scarlett, her great-grandmother, wrote to, his name is Jameson. That's Scarlett's, well, husband, although he obviously, you know, it doesn't end very smoothly. So that's actually not a spoiler. He dies. Let's put it that way. That's not a spoiler. I think it's kind of hinted in the synopsis, and it's even in there in like chapter 1. It's kind of all about that. But so it starts with a letter from Scarlett to Jameson, and it's in cursive, so you can tell that it's like, this is a letter, and then we go into the book. So it starts, "My dearest Jameson, this is not our end. My heart will always remain with you no matter where we are. Time and distance are only inconveniences to a love like ours. Whether it's days, months, or even years, I will be waiting. We will be waiting. You'll find me where the creek bends around the swaying aspen trees, just as we both dreamed, waiting with the one we love. It's killing me to leave you, but I'll do it for you. I'll keep us safe. I will wait for you every second, every hour, every day for the rest of my life. And if that's not enough, then eternity, which is exactly how long I'll love you, Jameson. Come back to me, my love, Scarlett. So that's the letter. And then it goes into the book from Georgia's perspective. Georgia Ellsworth. I brushed my thumb over my credit card, wishing I could wipe hard enough to erase the letters. 6 years of marriage, and the only thing I'd walked away with was a name that wasn't even mine. In a few minutes, I wouldn't have that either. Number 98, Juliet Sinclair called out from behind the plexiglass window of her booth, like I wasn't the only person at the Poplar Grove DMV and hadn't been for the last hour. I'd flown into Denver this morning, driven into the afternoon, and hadn't even been to my home yet. That's how desperate I was to rid myself of the last pieces of Damien in my life. Hopefully losing his name would make losing him and 6 years of my life hurt just a little less. Right here, I put my credit card away and walked up to her window. So that's the first page, the first chapter. So like I said, each chapter from Georgia's perspective begins with a letter from Scarlett to Jameson. It's not really a spoiler that Jameson dies, because that's kind of where the whole book starts. The whole thing is about Scarlett and how she never got to reunite with her love because he died. And that's, I think, one of the things that they talk about in the synopsis, where it's like her final book is about, her love and her relationship with Jameson, based in reality, like completely. It's almost like a biography. It's like an account of it. And then she never finished it. And everyone wanted to know why, because, even, Noah Harrison, who comes in later, the author, the romance author, is like, Scarlett Stanton wrote the best books and she wrote the best romances. And the one book she could never finish was the one about her own romance. And so, of course, that's what everyone is like wondering about. And of course, that's why he wants to be the one to finish her book. We go into a little bit in the book, why Georgia doesn't want her great-grandmother's book to be touched. It's too precious and valuable, and she doesn't want someone who didn't ever know her great-grandmother to come in and just finish the book. It's based in reality. It's not fiction. So, I think it's really great because, obviously you have Georgia and Noah at ends, like just completely at each other's throats because they both have different ideas of how to do things. And then you go back to reading about Scarlett and Jameson, and it's just, it's beautiful. You read this beautiful love story between these two British people living during World War II. And I mean, who doesn't love a good love story during, really hard times? So I think that it really keeps the book interesting. It keeps the book moving along constantly. You're like, okay, so what happened with Scarlett and Jameson, and what's gonna happen with Georgia and Noah? Because even if they don't end up together, you're like, well, is he gonna finish the book? Is everyone gonna like it? Like, you feel bad for Georgia because clearly from the first page and from the last part, the synopsis in the book, she is now exiting a marriage where she has no good feelings towards her ex. It is very much hard feelings. It is very much hard feelings towards her ex, Damien, as I read in the first page. And so there's a lot of aspects going on here. Everyone has their own pasts. Everyone has their own issues. And you get into all of it a little bit. You even get into Noah Harrison's life a little bit. And I love that because you see how everyone was different and then how they got together and why it just worked, why it just clicked for them. And I love that. I love when connection leads to more, because you can connect with a lot of people. You know, connections are very easy to make if you're yourself, and that's why you can make so many of them, but it can be harder to keep the connection and turn it into something, turn it into a relationship of some kind, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship or whatever. And so that's why I love this, because it's so great to see that working out from the connection to more. So anyway, that is just my thoughts of like the general part of the book. So now I'm going to be, if you don't want any spoilers, go ahead and stop the video. And thank you for watching. But now I'm going to be talking more about what happens in the book, and definitely including spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, please stop now. This is the time to stop watching the video. So if you're still watching, you've either read the book or don't care about spoilers. But in the end of the book, you know, we find out why Scarlett never finished the book, her last book. And it turns out that it's because Scarlett was not actually Scarlett. So Scarlett Stanton first started writing when she was still in England, when she was young, in like her 20s and 30s. And then when she came over to America, like, she still put out books, but she first started writing in England. And one of the things that Scarlett had always talked about that was so horrible for her was not just that Jameson died, because he died during the war. He was a pilot, he went down. But that her sister, Constance, died in a bombing. Like, they bombed civilians and she was a casualty. And obviously broke her heart. Her own sister died, and then her love died. And so when she came to America all by herself with her son. But we learn that at the end, it was not Scarlett that escaped Britain. It was Constance. Scarlett had died in the civilian bombing, but Constance and Scarlett's son had survived. And the only way for them to escape Britain was for Constance to pose as Scarlett. So for the rest of her life, Constance pretended to be her sister. And she did so because the only way to protect Scarlett's son, which I'm suddenly blanking on his name. Hang on, I'm gonna find it. Hang on. Scarlett's son's name is... I'm gonna find it, but the point is, the only way to save Scarlett's son, because they were living, I think it was in London, where that's where all of the bombing was happening, where civilians, children from old people were being killed almost constantly, because bombs were dropping all the time. And it was, you know, William, that's her son's name. I knew it was some basic white person name. I just couldn't remember. I was like, Henry? Then I was like, no, it's not. It was William. So the only way to save William was to protect him, was to take him to America, which is where Jameson was actually from. Only Scarlett and Constance were British, and Jameson was actually from America. He was an American pilot that was over in Britain fighting the war with them. And he made Scarlett promise before he left on his last mission that she and William would go to America, go be with his family in Colorado, so that they would be safe from the war. On their way, Constance was driving Scarlett and William to the plane that was going to take them out of the country, which was illegal because they weren't supposed to be doing it, but Jameson pulled strings. That was when they were bombed. And we, as the audience, we were led to believe that it was Scarlett that died. In Scarlett. Yeah, it was Constance that died in the bombing, but it turns out it was actually Scarlett. And Constance promised her sister in her last breaths that she would take William to America and protect him. So the only way to do it that fast, because that plane was leaving in like less than half an hour, was to pretend that she was Scarlet. And no one on the plane had met her before, and she looked enough like her sister that it would work. And it did. And so for the rest of her life, she posed as Scarlet instead of her actual self, which was Constance. And so, you know, I'm not going to go into complete like detail with it, but there's obviously like parts in the book where we kind of realize like, okay, that's why she did this and she never did this and and the reason she never finished the book was because she was Constance, not Scarlet. Scarlet started that book but never finished it. Now, there were other books that Scarlet had started that Constance finished based on like kind of vague writings that Scarlet had left, and was able to create books from it so that she could make a living and, you know, raise William. But she never finished that book because it was Scarlet's life, not hers. And so that's why we learned she never finished it. And I think that was just... there's so many other parts of the book to talk about. There's so many other things about it that I just love. But I think the thing that stuck to me the most was Constance's life. I mean, you know, these were two sisters that were very close. You know, in the book we learned that, you know, their parents were extremely wealthy. Was it like barons or something? And they were trying desperately to hold on to their name and their money and their titles and everything. And the girls didn't want that. And so they went off together, and it was just the two of them. They didn't have their parents anymore. And they were so close. And even Constance, you know, earlier in the book, we learned that she was in love with someone too, and she was going to marry him. And then he was killed in a civilian bombing too, but earlier on. And she just kind of, you know, just gave up on everything, gave up on love, gave up on everything. And I think that that's why she was so willing, not just because it was her sister who she loved and cared for so much, but because she lost the only future she wanted. That's why she was so willing to take William, pretend to be Scarlet, and go to America for the rest of her life and raise him and protect him. And that's exactly what she did. And I think that that's just one of the most heartbreaking yet beautiful stories that could ever be told. Because imagine that, like, you're spending basically the majority of your life, because she was in like her 20s or 30s and she died at like 90 something. She spent the majority of her life being called a name that wasn't hers, and in fact was her sister who she loved so much that died, and then she took her identity for a good cause, but still took her identity. And you can only imagine how heartbreaking and hard that was for her. But she was so dedicated and open to do this new thing, to make this new life so that she could raise William and he could be safe. And he was. I mean, we learn later in the book that unfortunately he and his wife died in a car accident at some point. I don't remember exactly how old Georgia or her mom was, but who knows. But it's just a crazy book. So Constance outlived her love, her sister's love, and her nephew, who she raised as her son. And then the entire time she's pretending to be her sister. And, you know, I just think it's a great story. I can't even imagine what that must feel like. Obviously it's fiction, but stories are there for a reason. They intrigue us. They get us to empathize with another person's situation, even if it is fictional. And I think that's the part of the book that stuck with me the most. You know, there's a lot of great other points in the book. What happens between Georgia and Noah, I'm going to leave that open, because even though this part of the video has spoilers, in case you read it, maybe it'll be a nice surprise. I'm going to leave that open. I'm not going to say what happens between Georgia and Noah. But I do have to admit, the one thing that was nice was that it worked out in a way for Scarlett, because once Jameson died, he was gone. Like, he was missing, but everyone knew he had died. But she was in denial because his plane went down and they weren't able to find the plane. But most logically, like, he died. She wasn't willing to admit it, and she was not willing to go on. Like, she, you know, it was just so difficult. And then she died not long after that. I'm gonna say like a week or so. And so they kind of died around the same time, which, you know, in her circumstance was kind of mercy for her because of just how in love with him she was. And, you know, I'm sure there's the realists out there that would say that is ridiculous. She could have lived a wonderful life, raised her son, who now was an orphan. But at the same time, it's fiction, so who cares? This wasn't real. This did not happen. And I think it was kind of beautiful, kind of poetic in a way, that the two of them that were so in love died at the same time-ish. The tragedy really is Constance, you know, because William was an infant when both of his parents died, so he wasn't going to remember them. He was raised by his aunt, who he believed to be his mother. I don't really think it was too bad for him, you know? He was safe, he was loved, he was raised in a nice place, wealthy, good place. I think he's fine. The real tragedy is Constance here. So those are my thoughts on it personally. And I think that's why I love the book so much. It makes me think. It makes me think about all these kinds of things. They're all fiction. It's all made up, but it makes me think about it. And it's like, okay, well, this is how I see it. I know there's going to be a lot of people with different opinions, different thoughts on it. And that's why I like to make these videos. If you guys have different thoughts, or maybe you agree with me, go ahead and comment below, because I'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts. This was a TikTok trending book, so I do expect most people to have at least heard of it or maybe read it. So yeah, go ahead and comment below what you thought of the book, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't agree with me. But I hope to see what you guys think. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Really, any of you that have been watching at least one or a couple of my videos, you have no idea what it means to me. I do this for fun, just for me. Like, I enjoy doing this, but it's nice when other people like what I do as well. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you enjoyed it. And subscribe to my channel. I will be doing this weekly, so more videos are coming, more like variety is coming, and yeah, I will see all of you guys next week.